Let's dig a little deeper tonight into this latest foreign policy challenge for the Biden administration and what to expect next from Russia. We're joined by someone who may know. Former CIA station chief, Fox News contributor Daniel Hoffman spent years in Moscow, very familiar with Putin and his ambitions. Daniel, great to have you back.
Thanks. Good to be here.
All right, start with this from the New York Times. It says Secretary of State Antony Blinken told his Russian counterpart, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in a hastily scheduled meeting in Geneva that the U.S. would provide written responses next week to Russia's demands that the West unwind its military presence in Eastern Europe. What is that all about?
Yeah, so, Vladimir Putin is a coldly calculating KGB operative, and he would never have incited this crisis by deploying 100,000 troops to Ukraine and threatening Ukraine's sovereignty if he didn't think he could win, if he didn't think he could benefit from it. And so Russia has launched these maximalist demands, demanding that NATO promise never to admit Ukraine as a member. Putin knows that's not possible. And demanding that we remove ballistic missile defenses from Romania and Poland, as well as troops from Eastern Europe where they're deployed. And Putin knows that those are unrealistic demands, but he's extorting the West, the United States, to negotiate, if we could use that term, on his terms. He wants to be perceived to be playing on a level playing field with the United States. He wants to weaken NATO, and we've seen a lot of division within NATO. And he's targeting Ukraine's independence.
So Bob Gates, the former Secretary of Defense under the Obama administration, who famously has said he thinks that President Biden has gotten nearly every foreign policy decision wrong that he's made in the last 40 years, has a new piece out in the Financial Times. He says Putin has received a great deal of unintended help from the U.S. Our domestic divisions and near paralysis in Congress, our perceived withdrawal from the Middle East, and more broadly from our 6-decade-long global leadership role and ignominious scuttling out of Afghanistan. Together, these have led many countries to hedge their bets and develop closer economic, political, and security ties with both Russia and China. So more broadly, how concerned are you about the current state of affairs with U.S. foreign policy?
I'm very concerned because I think one of the great lessons of the 20th century we learned quite well is that when the United States retreats diplomatically, then our enemies will take charge and will present greater national security threats to us. I think we should ask ourselves why Vladimir Putin chose this time to raise the stakes in Ukraine. Certainly after the United States' chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, he might have come to the conclusion that the Biden administration wants to focus on its own domestic priorities and China and other things. Vladimir Putin isn't going to let us do that. And he sees an opportunity for himself right now to weaken NATO, and he's taken it.
So Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, direct quote from him today to reporters in Geneva, there where our Benjamin Hall is. He says, quote, "We are not afraid of anyone, not even the U.S." I mean, is this more about Russia versus the U.S. versus anything having to do with Russia versus Ukraine? I mean, what is the bigger picture for them, the Russians?
Well, I think Ukraine is an existential threat, not because of any military threat they might pose to Russia. It's because they are trying to build a democracy with close ties to the European Union and NATO, and that's what scares Vladimir Putin, democracy. If Ukraine were to do that, that would be a clarion call to Putin's own opposition, whom Putin is ruthlessly repressing. That's why he can't allow Ukraine, a country with a sizable Russian-speaking population, to be Western-oriented. But Putin also derives a lot of benefit by being perceived, even though his country's GDP is the size of Italy's, as being able to go toe-to-toe with the United States. And what's missing right now is Ukraine. They're not even involved in any of these discussions, these negotiations. It's Russia and the United States, and that's just how Putin wants it. He wants a reprise of the Yalta Agreement nearing the end of World War II, when the United States and Russia divided, or Soviet Union divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. That's kind of what Vladimir Putin wants to do, and he wouldn't be doing this if he didn't think he could get away with it.
Well, we are on standby and heightened alert as the rest of the world is watching this play out. Daniel Hoffman, thank you for lending us some of your expertise on this.